Well, hi everyone.
Hello.
Good to see you. Thanks for joining me out to lunch today. How have you all been?
Pretty good.
Awesome. I have been thinking about some topics in recovery that seem to be taboo. And one of them is intimate relationships. And that's why I wanted to sit down and have lunch with you guys and talk about this, because I think there are some misconceptions about what it's like to have a mental health diagnosis and be in a relationship. I think there's this misunderstanding that we can't have successful relationships. I mean, I've been married for 21 years. Marie,
21 years?
21 years.
As young as you are?
I know. I'm older than I look, Dave. I know you were and you were married for a long time. Yeah, and you've been in a long-term relationship. So what I'm wondering is, what do you think makes a relationship work? Because, like, for instance, when you were first diagnosed, I know I was in a relationship when I was first diagnosed. I was already having mental health issues leading up to that. But I'm wondering what changed for you when you started experiencing your symptoms, got your diagnosis. What changed as far as intimate relationships with you? Because I know in my case, I lost that relationship because the person really didn't understand. I didn't really understand what was going on, and they certainly didn't. In that relationship, really just, there was no future there.
To be honest, it was never an issue for me. I was really not aware of my illness as the years went on, until I became well into my adult years.
Okay.
And fortunately, Ken and I got together 15 years ago.
Okay.
And we both have a diagnosis.
You both have a diagnosis.
And it just worked. Honestly, I never had to deal with that issue in all those years. I just kind of had boyfriends here and there, and my diagnosis really was irrelevant, honestly, in those years.
Okay.
Yeah, then the last 15 with Ken, different story.
I was actually diagnosed when I was, I think, 19. And
that's pretty young.
Yeah. And I was talking to a girl at the time, and I was very open about my mental health and what I was going through, because I checked into rehab at the time. I was really going through a lot of symptoms. And I thought I did a good job of being open, because I think communication is really important. She was really supportive of it. But it didn't work out because I had to continue to go to rehab instead of going back to school. And so she decided that, I didn't know what was really going on in her head when she decided she wanted to date someone else.
Okay.
So I think that might have affected it, her knowing that I had mental health diagnosis and not being sure how it would play out in the relationship.
But you were open about it.
Yeah, I was really open about it.
Was that a hard decision?
It was really rare, because I didn't open up about my mental health, like my depression or my anxiety. And it always played a huge role in my relationships, because I always had this abandonment anxiety. Going back to my relationship with my dad. And so I always had that, like, fear in the back of my mind that they would leave me, and sometimes I would cut off the relationship before they would ever have a chance to go. And so, like,
kind of preemptive before they could hurt you.
Preemptive.
Yeah.
So my mental health has always affected my intimate relationships and made it a lot more difficult, but it doesn't necessarily change how I treat them. I always treat them with respect, and I'm really open and honest with people in my intimate relationships.
Does it change how they treat you?
In some relationships it has, but they've been pretty understanding in every relationship that I've had. They've been pretty open about what they go through as well. And
Dave, you've been in the dating scene on and off for a while. How is living with your diagnosis, living with symptoms, how has that affected you over the years as far as dating?
Well, I was late to be diagnosed.
Okay.
My mental illness came on me when I was in the military, in the Army, in Korea. And I was on what is called the Nightmare Range, where we do our live war games in Korea. It was a big deal. And I was the head instructor for the gun is a small cannon that shoots out missiles and stuff. So I was in charge of that. I trained people for that, and I also performed it. And it became a contest after a while as to who could be the fastest to register on your mark and be ready to fire. And since I was in basic training, I was never defeated. I was always the fastest. That's why they made me an instructor.
Okay.
And it was a big deal. I felt very honored.
Yeah.
But right about then, that's when my mental illness hit me, and it hit me hard. I was passed me in the back of what's called a Gamma Goat, a 6-wheel drive vehicle. And I kept jumping out of the back of it while it was moving. I got so paranoid. I thought the guy was going to go over the mountain range and we'd all be killed, so I jumped out about 3.
We laugh because we
Well, it was weird.
Yeah.
So I jumped out of the vehicle about 3 or 4 times, and they were really looking at me like, what the hell is wrong with this guy?
Right.
And I didn't know what was going on. I knew I was being tortured, but I didn't know that my brain was torturing me. I didn't know that.
Were you in anything?
I didn't even get diagnosed till I was, about 30, 32, 33. But I had it the whole time. When I was homeless and everything, I had it.
Did your symptoms, do you think your symptoms, even without a diagnosis, did your symptoms change the way you approached intimate relationships?
Dating was very difficult. There were plenty of women, I'm going back to when I was in Korea. There were plenty of women to date and all that. And I did. But it was nightmarish. I thought for sure that the cops are going to come busting me down the door and arrest me and take me to military prison, that kind of stuff. My mind was just a rat's nest of fear.
So you really didn't know what was going on?
I had no idea what was going on.
Okay.
I just knew the world had just turned upside down. That's all I knew.
As things progressed and you started to kind of get a grasp of your illness, how did that change the way you approached dating later in life?
Well, after I was diagnosed, I went several years without a girlfriend. I didn't think I could have one. Then finally, the desire for a girlfriend was very strong.
Why didn't you think you could have one?
Because I just couldn't control my own life, and I knew I
Okay.
couldn't help her, my mate. So it was a struggle. But I did have plenty of girlfriends after I got out of service, came to San Diego. They were all torturous. They were very intimate relationships. Yeah. Put it bluntly, I loved sex. And so that was my main drive. That's the only reason why I got a girlfriend.
Who doesn't?
Yeah.
Come on.
True. So I had a lot of hookups. Then I met one crazy girl. Truly crazy. Crazier than I was. And so we hooked up. It was a great attraction. And it lasted for about 5 years off and on. But, the memories of that relationship.
What kept it going?
Because she had a mental illness too, but I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know until years later, after the relationship, when I studied on some mental illnesses. She had very deep depression.
So she knew you had a diagnosis?
No, she didn't know that.
Oh, you didn't disclose it to her?
No, I didn't know I had one.
Oh, that was, you still weren't diagnosed?
No,
my God.
I was diagnosed when I was about 3.
So 2 undiagnosed people in a relationship?
Yes.
Wow.
It was like an atomic bomb. It really was. It was chaotic. It was fun. We were self-medicating.
Of course.
And I didn't like her drinking. She didn't like my drinking, but we did both did.
But you drank.
Yeah, escapism. And it helped.
Yeah.
I got to admit, the alcohol helped.
Yeah.
It didn't cure anything, but it just made it a little more blurry, not so sharp,
So, diagnosis or not, if you're having the symptoms, it's a challenge.
It
to
is.
just interact with people.
Whether you're by yourself or in a crowd of people.
Sure.
You never know.
Sure. I'm wondering, once you meet that person, for instance, in my case, I met a person that, I really clicked with, who understood what I was dealing with. Marie, you were married for a long time.
I wasn't diagnosed until 2 years into the marriage.
Okay.
Yeah, so we were married like 20 years. And I didn't know I was ill, whatever, but I had all the symptoms that were, just causing trouble in our marriage, and I didn't know what was going on. He didn't know what was going on. So by then, I got a job for the county, and I got, insurance with Kaiser, and so I went to the doctor. He told me, I think you should be checked or something like that. So and then I got diagnosed by a psychiatrist that I had bipolar depression, whatever, bipolar disorder, whatever. And I told my husband, but he doesn't have a mental illness. I don't think so.
Right.
Yeah, I think he's normal, whatever.
Whatever that means.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
I think that's a setting on a dryer. Anyway.
Yeah, but we were having trouble already in our marriage, and I thought it was him, and
Okay.
he thought it was me.
And this was 2 years in, and then you find out, okay, I've got something going on.
Yeah, because like Dave was, I was self-medicating, I was also drinking.
Sure.
And my husband doesn't drink, but we just drink when we go out or whatever.
Okay.
And then I started realizing I had trouble with my drinking because I was drinking alone at home too.
Sure.
And I would hide it from my husband.
Okay.
Yeah, I would have bottles of wine back in the trunk of my car, and he'd find out about it. I wouldn't tell him for a
Because
long
you
time.
were experiencing
Anxiety,
depression,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
you're self-medicated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know.
Excuse
And
me, what is your diagnosis?
bipolar disorder and some kind of personality disorder.
Okay.
Yeah. So, it was really hard for him.
When you told him, how did he react?
Well, he knew there was something wrong.
Okay. So he was already like,
Yeah,
there's
but
something
he
going on.
didn't know exactly what it was.
Okay.
So at least now there was a name to it, and
Right.
he was able to, kind of adjust to it. But my husband was really loyal to me. I mean, he was really faithful, and he tried. We struggled through the marriage, and I tried to leave it several times, but he wouldn't let me leave.
Yeah.
So that was nice, though. I really appreciated that.
How important was your self-care to your marriage? Because your husband can't fix it. My wife can't fix my illness.
Yeah.
How important was it for you to take care of yourself in order to be healthy in your relationship?
That was a hard part. That was a hard part for both of us because I was in the hospital a lot.
Okay.
And at one point he said, if you're going to be there, you might as well stay there.
Mm-hmm.
But every time he'd pick me up and take me home.
So, Casey, you were talking about communication earlier.
Yeah.
And I think you're the youngest one at the table.
I'm going to guess that.
Yeah. I'm guessing that. Yes, you have no gray hair showing. So,
Not yet.
I'm wondering, I've been out of the dating scene for a long time.
Yeah.
And I'm glad about that, quite frankly, because it's rough, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm wondering, how has technology changed the way you interact with people? How has it affected the approach to dating? And do you include, any information about your mental health when you're using like online dating apps and things like that?
Yeah, no, you don't mention anything about it. I mean, you it depends what you're using, because I didn't use apps too much. I was on Tinder, and it was just more messing around, seeing like what would happen, seeing if I would actually meet people. But the success rate of them actually responding, because you'll get some people to respond, some girls will respond, but then after a while they just kind of fall out.
Okay.
And some are interested in only just hooking up, and I'm looking for a more like long-term relationship. So I'm probably looking in the wrong places. But yeah,
I think there's a song.
Right.
Well, it definitely is. But yeah, I don't know, like online dating. It seems like you gotta go to the right one, because I've tried Tinder. It doesn't work. I mean, it works for some people, but it didn't work for me.
So it's like you have your real world persona and your electronic persona.
Yeah, you gotta have a good bio to get people to actually respond. Yeah,
Right. And you might not want to lead with, I have a mental illness.
Yeah, you're trying to sell yourself, and so
Right.
can't
I
really sell you.
understand.
Yeah.
I understand. Yeah, I know when I had been diagnosed for, let's see, I guess probably about 2 years when I met my wife. And, the diagnosis, I mean, I had a hospitalization, and there was a lot of fallout from that, just like there is for any of us, early on in our lives. So I was kind of piecing my life back together, and it really just dawned on me that this was something that I was going to have to live with for the rest of my life. And it was something that was affecting my personality, and that's what's difficult, I think. Would you guys agree that our illness affects our personality?
Definitely.
And sometimes it's hard for people to separate the illness and the symptoms from who you are as a person.
Mm-hmm.
I know in my case with my wife, I mean, I let her know early on when we were dating because I felt like it was important to let her know, because it's not like it's something that's not going to come up eventually. You know what I mean? And so I was very open about it. And in response, she has over the years really worked to learn about my illness and learn about what kind of support I need, and really learn what is the difference between my personality when I'm symptomatic versus my personality when I'm not symptomatic. Virginia, you're in a relationship with someone, you both have mental health issues. How do you separate the person from the symptoms?
I have to say, from Ken's perspective, he works on that a lot. I have been unusually different in my personality since a medication change just over a year ago, and he's been really working on saying, you know what, I get snippy, I get angry quickly, and he does that. He says, well, you know what, those are her symptoms, and I'm taking everything she says and her attitude with a grain of salt. And in fact, he goes further. He loves me. He's patient most of the time.
We do try people's patience. I know I do. What I think is funny, though, and kind of ironic, is that everything you're talking about in your relationship, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you disagree, these are keys to having a successful relationship, whether you have a diagnosis or not.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Communication, support,
yes.
Understanding that the person, is, maybe experiencing something that they are not in control of.
Right.
But also taking care of yourself, because you take care of yourself. He takes care of himself.
Yes.
And then
he
doesn't. Does he rely on you to take care of him?
No.
Right.
No, he doesn't. But he is very good at wanting to take care of me.
So I think we can agree communication and self-care are important in any kind of relationship, whether you have a diagnosis or not. Dave, I want to pick on you for a minute. Okay. What happens if you're in a relationship with someone who has a mental health disorder as well, and self-care and things like that are not a big part of it? How does the relationship go?
Well, I can only speak of how my relationship went. With my last girlfriend, her name was LaDonna. It was 5 years ago.
5 years. It's at least 5 years. Yes. Yes.
Anyway, you know how it is with the nightmare.
It's hard to shake them.
Yeah. But in the relationship, there were so many good points, so many high points. But I should start with this. She was my next door neighbor.
Okay.
Right next door. Not down the hall, but right next door.
Okay.
And I really didn't notice her at all, really, until one day she popped up and looked me in the eyes. Her eyes were very beautiful blue, and I was gone. I said, I got to make something out of this. So we did. I mean, I told her I liked her. I wanted to make a good relationship. And is she interested? She said, yeah.
Yeah.
And so it started out smoothly. And then on really the first date was when I took her to get her ECT treatment.
That was a date.
That was a date. Yeah.
Okay.
So that sort of shows you what our relationship is like.
That shit. Well, yeah, it's part of it.
But I loved it. It was a relationship.
Sure.
I was with someone. I loved her. She loved me. We took care of each other the best we could, which was good. It was one of the most uplifting relationships I'd ever had. But the fallout from our mental illnesses, trying to struggle within ourselves,
Right.
and then with each other, and then the world at large,
Right.
it's not an easy feat. It might sound like it, but it isn't.
No.
It is hard.
Yes.
And it takes work, but it's worth it when it works out. It just didn't work out for us, though. We were intimate. What was her disorder? Her disorder was some personality disorder, borderline personality.
That's the first one that comes to mind.
And so I didn't know how to deal with that.
Did she tell you how to deal with it?
Well, she told me when I did things wrong.
Okay, that tends to happen.
And she would start out very delicate, very softly, very feminine. And if I didn't do what she said, then the bulldog came out. Yeah. But I liked it. I liked her for different personalities. It was really interesting.
Yeah.
I just loved her.
When you're in a relationship with someone and let's say you get to a point where you may have to be hospitalized, how do you help? I mean, because you're in crisis, right? If you have to be hospitalized, but once you start to get stabilized, how do you help your significant other or your partner understand and kind of cope with what's going on? I'm thinking about maybe like the first time they have to support you when you're hospitalized. Marie, how did your husband handle that?
He was confused a lot.
He was confused.
He didn't know exactly what to do, but he was always there to pick me up and take me home,
Yeah.
And he took me to the hospital. I didn't have to go in ambulance or whatever.
Yeah.
So, he was always there, but, he didn't understand what was going on. So, but, I appreciated that a lot, in him. But, I don't know, it just through the years, I think, and talking to professionals and stuff like my doctors or whatever, because he would talk to my doctor.
He did talk to your doctor. Yeah.
Because he wanted to know exactly.
Yeah, my wife does that too.
Yeah, so it's really supportive. It's nice.
Yeah.
I knew then that he really wanted to stay in our good relationship.
Do you think it scares them when this happens to us?
Yeah. One time he said, "Poor me."
Yeah.
He said, "Poor
Right.
me."
Right. Because one thing I've tried to explain to my wife, and she knows, after this many years, is that I'm not always like this. And I don't choose this. It's because I have an illness. And once you're in a relationship with someone where they can separate the person from the illness, I think you're able to do that.
Then you got to get started, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's like we said, with any relationship, it's communication, it's being clear, being honest. I think being open about it. How important is honesty in a relationship when you're dealing with things like this?
Ken and I have always prized our honesty with one another since the day since our first date, and honesty is very important for Ken and I. Because then we really know where the other person is coming from. We learn to trust each other. Really, I'm just learning how to let him closer to me.
Yeah.
And I'm really learning how to trust him more with this med change in particular that I have been going through. And that honesty, the who I am, this is who I am, this is what I need, this is how I feel, is very important in how our relationship functions, and it makes it healthier.
I had a question, because this is something that I've been thinking about, is like, do I want to be in a relationship with someone who also has a mental health diagnosis, because then they're able to relate to me and we can be more supportive of each other, or would I want somebody who necessarily doesn't, so that they're more stable, so they can support me?
That's a good
I'm
question.
Unstable, or unstable, because I don't know.
One of the realities that we all deal with is that no matter how well we take care of ourselves and practice self-care and go to the therapy and go to the doctor, sometimes things are going to break down. And I know that in my relationship with my wife, the first time that happened, it was really scary for her, because even though she was aware of my illness and aware of symptoms, when you get to the point, as you guys know, where you may need to be hospitalized, it's almost like you're a different person. It's almost like your personality takes a back seat to your symptoms, and your symptoms become kind of all-encompassing. And I remember when that happened to me, and I was experiencing a lot of distress, a lot of thoughts of harm to myself. That's really scary. when people that we love have to see that. And I think it's really frightening when you have to go into the hospital, because you're being sent to a hospital by yourself to a group of people to take care of you, to help you get better. Your spouse or your significant other is not there, and they're relying on other people to take care of you. And that can be a really stressful time for people in a relationship. And I think it kind of affects your relationship afterwards, because that person has seen the full extent of what your illness can be.
And it can be very scary.
It can be very scary.
Yeah.
It can be very scary.
Yeah.
And I know that even simple things like, for instance, medication, right? There are medications that can almost change your personality. I know you were talking about medications earlier.
Yeah.
And you're at the early stages where you're trying to figure out what works, what doesn't. So, I mean, how are you taking that on, and how do you think that's going to affect your relationships in the future?
I think it affects it a lot. I do a very good job of not reflecting on what's really going on the inside, because people might have no idea. They might think like, oh, Casey's fine, he's doing well, and then the next minute he's in the hospital. Because I've learned from my time, like growing up, where it was like no showing, hide your symptoms, no showing emotion. My dad was very stoic. So I'm able to, people don't really know what's going on with me. Mm-hmm. And so I tend to hide it in my relationships, whether it's intimate relationships or whether it's family. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes it's a good thing, because I'm able to maintain composure until I can go to somewhere where I can get help and really kind of break down. But it also is like a trust thing that, I kind of mistrust other people. And so it's like it makes it more difficult on the relationship. Yeah, to be open and really know what's going on with me. So that's something that I'm trying to work on, is being able to communicate what's really going on. Mm-hmm. But it's hard. It's really hard for me to do that.
And sometimes meds can slow you down to the point where, if you're in a relationship, the other person may not understand that some days the best you can do is get out of bed.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Before this med change, I was on Zyprexa for 2 decades. Mm-hmm. And that first 10 years Ken and I were together, I could barely make it to work at night. And that was, I had a night job, so I could sleep in, and I did. Right. I did. I slept 13, 14 hours a day. I wouldn't go anywhere with Ken. Fortunately, he accepted it.
Marie, did med changes ever impact what was going on in your house? I mean, I know, we all it's trial and error sometimes with medication.
I think my problem was not exactly the med. Well, the med change too, but it was me not taking my meds.
Okay.
So it was, then you can see.
You can definitely see, right?
Like a totally different personality, and my son, and my husband would say, "Who are you today?" It's just like night and day or something.
I understand that, because my wife will say that that's your bipolar talking.
Yeah, exactly.
She says stuff like that to me, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I have bipolar disorder. I forgot.
It means they understand your mood change.
They do understand. Yeah, I mean, I think that's important.
Yeah.
That's where that communication comes in, I think. Is that having someone understand how you are when you're well is really important, because when you're not well, they know, and they can know
who they're loving,
right?
Ultimately, and it's like you said, separating the symptoms from the person,
right?
And they remember, this is the person I love,
right?
And it helps them see it through. I can see that.
Right.
And sometimes you can't even see you're going down a downward spiral,
right?
Mm-hmm. And other people that love you can see it and intervene.
Exactly.
Sometimes I'm just like,
exactly.
How did I get here? I'm in crisis mode. I don't know what to do. But how did I get here? And people can, we could kind of tell you're going downward spiral.
Right. It's 2 a.m. and you're sitting in the living room in the dark. I'm fine. No, I'm fine. Yeah, no, you're not fine. Everyone, I think all of us need somebody to say that, right?
Yes,
you're not fine. You're not doing
somebody.
Dave has somebody. Well, I just think that, I think you guys can agree with this, that aside from the fact that we have a medical condition, the things that are important to having a good, healthy relationship, whether you're just entering into a relationship or whether you've had a relationship for 20 years, things like communication, honesty, learning each other, learning about each other.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, would you say this is something that's important for any relationship?
Any relationship, of course. Yeah.
And just have your partner know that occasionally things may go south.
Yeah.
And help them prepare for that when that happens. It's not to say it's going to happen, but it could.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want it to blindside them.
Right.
You know,
I think it keeps it from being boring.
it's definitely not boring. My wife tells me that all the time. She's like, "You're definitely not boring." Definitely not boring. Well, I want to thank you guys for coming out today and talking with me out to lunch. It was a great conversation.
It was
I
wonderful.
enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I think we've learned
Awesome.
we've learned a lot about each other, and I would really like to do this again with you guys. I hope we
Yeah.
can do it soon.
Sure.
All right. Well, cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah.